In terms of questioning, if we could start now with Mr. McGurk. As I mentioned in my remarks, you testified before the committee in February, and you told us of ISIS's plan to take control of western Iraq and to challenge the Iraqis' government control of Baghdad, and you reported that it was the administration's objective to prevent ISIS from ever having a sanctuary in western Iraq again. There were countless other warning signs, and I know that you, as Deputy Assistant Secretary, and others in the U.S. government were sounding the alarm. And your testimony was absolutely correct. We did see this coming, and that makes it even more troubling that the administration didn't do what was necessary to prevent ISIS from taking over such a large swath of Iraq. And specifically, the Iraqis asked multiple times for drone airstrikes against clearly identifiable ISIS targets in the desert. Some in our embassy brought this up as well. The agitation was for strikes on terror camps. And we know that the administration rejected those requests. Now, no one likes Maliki, but given this ISIS threat and given the administration's stated goal of preventing an ISIS sanctuary in western Iraq, why didn't we support, at least in this limited way, attacks that would have done damage to these columns or to the encampments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me try to correct the record on a few things. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee in February. And I think what I described was when we really started to see this problem emerge over the course of last summer. And the first principle and the President's policy is that we want to enable local actors to be able to secure their sovereign space as best we can. That was also the desire of the Iraqi government. The Iraqi government wanted to act on its own with our assistance and enabling functions. We worked through the summer and fall through our own surveillance and also by showing the Iraqis how they could use their capability to be able to target some of these sites. They have a platform called a King Air, which does persistence intelligence. They have a platform called a Caravan aircraft, which can fire Hellfire missiles, and we are able, with our information, to be able to kind of jerry-rig those systems in a way that they were quite effective, and they were effective against those camps. The formal request from the Iraqis for direct U.S. air support did not come in a formal way until May, and it came on a visit with General Austin, and I was there with General Austin during that visit, and then a subsequent phone call between the Prime Minister and the Vice President. And since that time, obviously, we've been looking at various options. But the first principle was to enable the Iraqis to deny safe havens and camps and sanctuaries within their sovereign space. They, of course, faced a significant problem across the Syrian border, which was increasingly in control of ISIS over the last 3 months of last year, and the border increasingly became under threat. But the first principle was to enable the Iraqis. That was something the Iraqis also wanted, and that was through the Hellfire missiles, through the Caravan aircrafts, and through the persistent ISR. But the formal request for direct U.S. air support came in May.
Well, let me just say that we already have experience in Afghanistan with the fact that when you're dealing with suicide bombers, or people who want to martyr themselves in the attack, the one thing on the ground, for example, that Afghans are looking for are air support. Traditionally, secular militaries run away in the face of people trying to lose their own life in an attack, and they call in air support. It's been a problem. I mean, I talked to the Italians about this. What do they want? What did they ask for? Drones above that could give air support for their troops in Afghanistan. So you got a situation like this. Yes, you've got Hellfire missiles, but the Iraqis were trying to fire these from retrofitted Cessna airplanes. In an environment like that, when you see this coming and you know that air support psychologically for infantry on the ground in this kind of an environment has been such an issue in Afghanistan, when you're up against jihadists, why why wouldn't we? It wasn't just that the request was coming from the Iraqi government. As I say, some in the embassy pushed for this. Certainly I raised this a number of times. I'm just trying to figure out why, when you can monitor something with the eyes of a drone that can go in and actually see below it, you know, that you have in the Jeep, the flag of Al-Qaeda waving and a column moving across the desert, why that asset wouldn't be deployed as these troops are coming out of Syria, or why you wouldn't take the encampment and come in and take out that encampment. I understand that this request went all the way up in the, in the administration and was turned down. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of why.
Again, I want to just answer from my own personal recollection this. First, the camps, the Iraqis are very effective against the camps with the Hellfires, particularly over the latter course of 2013. ISIL kind of poured out of the camps, particularly when they started to be hit, and moved into the cities.
Yeah, but again, this is with a retrofitted Cessna airplane. At least this is what I understand from the Iraqis, that they were trying to deal with in order to suppress that. Can you imagine how effective it would have been with something, a platform that could really deliver something more than a Hellfire?
I also just want to correct the record. When the request did come in May, the formal request for direct air support, that request never went up and has been denied. In fact, it is still under active consideration. There has never been a denial of
that's like saying, if I could interrupt you, because I remember Elliot Engel making the point 3 years ago about support for the Free Syrian Army when there were no foreign fighters in Syria, and him laying out the argument that foreign fighters were going to come in the absence if we didn't support the Free Syrian Army. That's like saying, well, that's still under active consideration. Well, yes, but after 3 years of not effectively getting engaged in a major way, the clock begins to run out and things happen on the ground. And that is what's happened with ISIS. We've watched it come into a vacuum over a 3-year period, establish itself on the border with Iraq, no action being taken against that encampment, no effective support to the Free Syrian Army to do something about it. Then we watched it go from city to city across Iraq without it being hit from the air with drones, despite the requests that I know were being made. This is the reason for, at least from my part, concern about lack of action here.
I was just on Thursday of last week, before flying back, I was in our new Joint Operations Center, which we've set up in Baghdad, and I can say that the information we have now on these networks is night and day from where it was in May when the request from the Iraqis first came in. Therefore, the options that are being developed for the President will be much more concrete and specific than anything we could have had before, and there is a significant risk, Mr. Chairman, of taking any military action without that level of granularity. So clearly, when the request came in May, we were not able to do anything immediately in any event. Yeah. We now have a much better picture which will inform eventual decisions from the President, and any decisions in that regard which would be made or might be made or considered would be in the full consultation with this committee and the Congress.
Right, but ISIS now has the treasury of the central bank in Mosul, so they have at their disposal, probably $500 million.
They're very good at propaganda. They put out that they got $400 million in the first week or so. We don't think that's particularly true, but they are a self-sustaining organization, and they are flush with resources, cash and equipment, no question.
Well, I'm out of time. I'll go to Mr. Engel.